You know, for most of us, getting married is this huge, joyful milestone. But imagine this. For tens of thousands of American women in the early 20th century, saying I do to someone from another country came with this unbelievable price tag, their United States citizenship. Yeah, we're about to dive into a really little-known and honestly pretty shocking chapter of American history.
Take a look at this document. This tells the story of Amelia Pisani Westphal. In 1942, she had to write this formal declaration. It says, I lost, or believe that I lost, United States citizenship solely by reason of my marriage to Julius H. Westphal, then an alien, a citizen, or subject of Germany. Just let that sink in for a second. Amelia was born in America, but decades after her wedding, she was still fighting to get back the citizenship she lost just by marrying a German man.
And Amelia's story just begs the question, right? How could an American-born woman, someone who might not have ever even left her own hometown, suddenly be considered a foreigner in her own country? I mean, what was going on here?
Well, the reality was just as bizarre as it sounds. These women, who were American through and through, had to go through this formal legal process of re-swearing their allegiance to the United States. They had to pledge loyalty to the country that was already theirs from birth. It's wild.
So, what caused all this? The answer really lies in one single devastating piece of legislation, the Expatriation Act of 1907. And its impact? Well, it was immediate, and it was absolutely life-altering for thousands.
The change was like flipping a switch. Before 1907, things were pretty straightforward. If an American woman married a foreigner but they stayed in the U.S., she was still an American citizen. Simple. But after March 2nd, 1907, everything changed. The law now said she automatically took the nationality of her husband, period.
And the language of the law itself was just so absolute. There was no wiggle room. It says, any American woman who marries a foreigner shall take the nationality of her husband. Just like that. A woman's entire national identity was legally erased and replaced with her husband's.
Think about what that really means. Her legal identity literally morphed into her husband's. It didn't matter if they lived in New York or Berlin, if she'd ever met his family, if she even spoke his language. In the eyes of the U.S. government, she was no longer one of its own.
So once a woman's citizenship was just gone, getting it back was not easy. For so many, it turned into this long, complicated, and incredibly frustrating journey to reclaim what was supposed to be their birthright.
She basically had two paths, and let's be real, neither one gave her much control. First option, she could wait for her husband to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. Then she could regain her citizenship, but only through him. Or option two, if he didn't naturalize, she had to start from square one and go through the whole grueling naturalization process herself, just like any other immigrant. And here is the absolute worst part, the ultimate catch-22. Her fate was completely tied to his. If the U.S. government decided not to grant her husband citizenship, for any reason whatsoever, all the doors were slammed shut. She had no other options to get her own birthright back.
This right here is the actual petition for naturalization for a woman named Betty Mundy. I mean, just look at this thing. Look at all that dense legal language, the affidavits, the witnesses she needed. This intimidating bureaucratic mountain. This is what it meant to apply as a true immigrant, even if you were born and raised right here in America.
Okay, so after 15 years of this injustice, Congress finally acted. But the first real attempt to fix the problem, the Cable Act of 1922, well, it was only a partial solution.
The law was officially called the Married Women's Independent Nationality Act, which sounds pretty great, right? A huge step forward. And its main goal was to repeal that incredibly damaging 1907 Expatriation Act.
So what did it actually do? Well, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news, any woman who got married to a foreigner after September 22, 1922 would no longer automatically lose her citizenship. Huge. But the bad news, the law wasn't retroactive. For the thousands of women like Amelia Westphal who had already lost their citizenship, nothing changed. They still had to go through that whole naturalization process.
And kind of ironically, the Cable Act created its own set of problems. See, before, a woman's citizenship status changed automatically with her husband's. Now, it didn't. So if a woman had lost her citizenship by marrying, say, a British man, and he later became a U.S. citizen, she stayed a British citizen until she actively went through naturalization on her own. You can imagine all the legal confusion that caused. This whole legislative journey was just so frustrating. So let's recap. In 1907, the Expatriation Act takes citizenship away. Then in 1922, the Cable Act stops it from happening anymore. But then, just 2 years later, a new immigration quota law comes along and creates yet another hurdle, making it even harder for these women living abroad to get a visa to even come home and try to get their citizenship back.
It would take another decade and a half for the law to finally fully catch up with just basic common sense and fairness. And this brings us to the final steps toward justice.
A really big breakthrough finally came with an act in 1936. It offered a much simpler path home, but there was a catch. It was only for a specific group, women whose marriages to foreigners had ended either because their husband died or they got divorced. For them, that long naturalization process was finally replaced with just a simple oath of allegiance.
And the 1936 Act, it really changed lives. This is Martha Empey. She was born in Washington State, lost her citizenship when she married a Canadian. But after their divorce, this new law gave her a simple way home. This document from 1939 is her application to reclaim her birthright, not through some long, complicated process, but with a simple oath.
But what about all the women who were still married? The final piece of this whole puzzle finally clicked into place with the Act of July 2nd, 1940. This was the big one. It allowed all women who had lost their citizenship by marriage to repatriate, no matter what their marital status was.
And this is what that final victory looked like for someone. This is Yetta Ostrovsky's application. She lost her citizenship way back in 1919 after marrying a Russian man. For over 30 years, they stayed married. And then, in 1951, thanks to that 1940 law, she was finally able to take the oath and become an American citizen again, without having to choose between her country and her husband.
So, after a 33-year struggle, from 1907 all the way to 1940, this long, unjust chapter was finally closed. For thousands of American women, all it took to reclaim the citizenship that should have been theirs all along was, in the end, a simple oath.
And we end with this anonymous image of a couple, just waiting for a marriage license. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Their future is full of hope, but for a whole generation of women, this exact moment, this simple act, carried a profound and hidden consequence. It really leaves us with a question. What does citizenship truly mean if it can be given and taken away with just the words, "I do"?